B-Leaguers, welcome to the B-League Pick'em Show. On behalf of Going for2 Live and Underdog Fantasy promo code. Well, Underdog now, they don't call it Underdog Fantasy, just Underdog, right? Promo code GF2 for 100% matching deposit up to $250 on your initial outlay. Welcome to our Sunday Slate prop show. Courtesy of Going for2 Live. We're posting this on a Saturday, so hopefully the lines haven't changed too much. If they have, please adjust accordingly and just go with your own feel on what they might be. But because I'm going to give you 5 props to pick from Week 8 NFL slate, and we can see where the variance lies in a few days' time. Not much has changed too much since the research went into this yesterday. It's now Wednesday here. This is a pre-recorded show, as you can see from the tracker, or if you're hearing me now, it's recorded on Wednesday. So normally the research goes in on Tuesday, and the lines can change a little bit depending on news overnight, players' injuries, suspensions, all that sort of stuff, as it would be. But we're going to talk about the Sunday slate. We're going to go pick number 1. We're going to talk about one of my favorite players. He plays for the opposition. I don't really like talking about the Eagles players too much, but one of my favorite players to watch since his time in Tennessee and Ole Miss, A.J. Brown. We're going to go higher than 77.5 receiving yards in Cincinnati. The Eagles travel on the road after slapping the absolute piss out of the Giants. In 3 games this year, he's punched out 89, 116, and 119 yards in those games. He's only played the 3 games. He's gone over 89 as a minimum. His line is 77.5 right now. And in those games, he's required a 38% target share. So he's the guy that they're throwing to against the Bengals in a high implied total game. He could legit get to this total off 2 receptions. I back him to do that. He's that damn good. He's that damn lethal at this point. I'm confident saying that, knowing Brown is currently 4th overall in the NFL with the highest yards per reception at 20.3. So 4th overall in that spectre. So we're talking about yards. He could get there of 3 or 4 receptions knowing that. This game's implied total of 48 seems lean. I know both teams can blow up at this point. So if this is a shootout, A.J. Brown is going to eat. The Bengals, though, they've been allowing big games to wide receivers all year round. Like you've got last week, Cedric Tillman with Jameis Winston. Think about that for a second. Zay Flowers, Deontay Johnson with Andy Dalton, Terry McLaurin, all these guys went over 80 yards in those games against, I think, only Darius Slayton. He had, I think, he had like 55 a couple of weeks ago. And I think Rashee Rice in week 2, I think he had 75. They're the only guys to not hit over 77.5 yards or in those games against the Bengals. I get the idea that maybe slot guys are going to get more work against the Bengals. I think it's more of it when you hear, especially when you hear the names like Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Zay Flowers. I think it's more or less a case of the team's best receiver is getting moved around enough to be in the slot to do that. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a Devonta Smith who's going to do all that. I think A.J. Brown's going to get his work in that regard, as it would be. Pick number 2 is going to be a bit of an interesting one because when you think about it, against this team, he really should be doing well. But we're going to go Bo Nix lower than 190.5 passing yards versus Carolina. I know that sounds weird to say because it's Carolina, but it is what it is. I don't like betting against someone versus a team that's allowed the most passing yards. It seems kind of like an uber aggressive statement to make, but look, hear me out. They've only allowed him 190 against the worst team in the NFL. That's what Underdog's line has been, 190 yards against the worst team in the NFL. That's how much faith they have in him as a whole. So he's had 1 game really over 220 this year and under 190 in 2 out of his last 4. So both of those, however, away from home. So, he's at home this week. So that's a bit more of a positive up his sleeve. I think one of those games might have been the Jets in a really sludgy, wet weather game. I get that too. So that's a bit, I don't want to be too harsh on the guy. He has started to look a little bit better, but his receivers are just all over the place. I can see where they get the run game going instead. Okay, and I feel like, he sits around that 210, 216 range as a whole, but they're going to get away with this pretty quickly, I think, against Carolina, especially with Andy Dalton being in the car accident a few days ago. If he plays, that's kind of wild as well. Their whole week is disrupted, right? So then I hope Andy and his family are fine, but their whole week and their preparation is disrupted. They're going to go on the road to Denver like in a day's time, and then what? Like, get ready for this? So I don't think that's how it's going to work that efficiently for the Panthers. Look, they've allowed the most rush yards this year, right? So I feel like this is the way the Denver Broncos game is going to go. And Denver seem to lean on the run as a strength. So we can pivot to Javonte Williams over 56.5 rush yards. If you feel like Knicks' line is too low, some people aren't comfortable going on quarterbacks under a certain range. I understand that. But if not, then pivot to Javonte Williams over 56.5. If you feel a bit squeamish on that, Williams met this line and succeeded in 3 out of the last 4 games this year. So I'd feel better about this. Speaking of getting weird, let's get weird. Let's talk about The one thing that we probably don't want to do right now, because they're an absolute hot mess, but let's talk about them anyway. Let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. Let's talk about some receivers scoring touchdowns. Why don't we do that? Nick Akini Westbrook and or Chiga Okonkwo higher than half a touchdown, both of them getting about a 3.52 X boost on this. So they're basically telling you, please, someone be stupid enough to bet on this. Hi, I'm stupid and I'm going to bet on this. Look, back-to-back games with a touchdown for Akini Westbrook. Burks on the IR, Hopkins traded to the Chiefs. He's going to see more field game, and that's about to blow up, I think, for him. Now, he's not more than a jump ball red zone specialist. I feel like that's where he's at. He plays in the slot every now and again. I feel like he's okay in that regard, and that's all he has to really be. But look, the Lions, funnily enough, we've only given up 4 touchdowns this year to wide receivers, and I'm not saying it's a good bet, but I'm saying if you had to bet on a receiver with a boost in this one, I don't hate it. That boost is going to go a long way to a guy that really is the only guy that's scored for the Titans of late. It's not really Calvin Ridley. He's done nothing, right? So it's kind of been all over the place for the Titans. So I'm looking at the guys that have been doing it on the tertiary, and you get that 3.72 or 3.52 boost for a touchdown. I feel like that could be something going on here. Look, last week also, Chiga Okonkwo, speaking of the other guys, he proved to be one of the best pass option for the Titans last week. And although that doesn't mean much, going 4 for 4 with new starter Mason Rudolph does mean something. Okonkwo hasn't scored in a few weeks, and the Lions generally play tight ends tough. But that bonus and his looks from Rudolph could be something this week. And the Lions like high-scoring games, right? Like this is going to happen. The Lions going over 50 at home seems very wax on, wax off. I feel like this could be something where we look at the Titans guys and go, oh, wow, we should have seen that coming at the end of the week. And we go, oh, yeah, we spoke about that on Wednesday, then Saturday. So it's something to look at. And those bonuses are something to maybe sink your teeth in later in the week. Pick number 4, we're going to talk about a guy that I really think is the most overhyped, overrated player in the NFL. That is Mr. Trevor Lawrence, lower than 233.5 passing yards at home to the Green Bay Packers. I see the blur below. I click on, I'm looking through players to look at, I'm clicking, and I'm clicking, and Trevor Lawrence pops up and like, wow, 235 against the Packers. That's interesting. And the blur basically says it all about what he is and what he needs to be. Lawrence efficient and mistake-free in win. That's what you're going to have to get out of him. It can't be these shootouts where he's like going off because he gets caught, he gets sacked, he gets intercepted, he fumbles. He punched under 200 passing yards in a game they really should have wrapped up against the Patriots easier than they did. And they were in London a week or 2 before the Patriots even got there. So the idea that like he had a really good efficient win, might just because he was there early and he was settled and he was able to figure it out. The truth is, I don't know what to make of this guy. I've been dubbing him Daniel Jones Light. I really think if he was in the media market of New York, he'd have been booted to Denver like all the other New York quarterbacks a year ago. He would have survived. He would have survived less. He would have survived a shorter period of time than Zach Wilson did. And I asked the Jets, but this is New York, and he ain't getting nothing out of them. It's a good thing that he's in like media cesspool. It's just nothing out in Jacksonville. No one cares, right? But if he was in any other relevant town, they would have killed him by now. They would have kicked him out so quick. So I don't see how this guy keeps getting away with this, because anyone can have half a decent year, right? Like, we've seen that. He's not that good. Let's just move on from that part. But look, he's struggling with all the talent around him to get to 230. And that's crazy. Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, ETN, generally. I know he wasn't about last week. You look at the receivers he's had, Calvin Ridley. He's struggling to get to these markers. It's not easy. This is who he is. And the only time he's been over 235 this year was against the Colts, who, let's face it, let everyone do that to him. Everyone gets on the Colts, and yet he's struggling? I don't believe it. All of a sudden, he's going to do it against the Packers. The way to beat the Packers, everyone can see this, is on the ground. And I know Kyle can talk about this. Every Packers fan can talk about this until the cows come home. The Packers are starting to look a little bit better. Okay, great. But the run defense generally has been atrocious. That's just who they are. Bend, don't break, right? That's what we know them. The bend, don't break Packers, right? That's what we know them as. Get them on the ground. This is going to be like a Tank Bigsby week, right? Mount up, son. It's going to be your week. Trevor Lawrence? No, we're good on the overs here. We're good. Pick number 5, speaking of good on the overs, Jordan Mason. 80.5 rushing yards, higher versus Dallas. We're going to do that. You think after having a week off, we've forgotten how bad the Cowboys' rush defense is? Come on, stop it. They're terrible. They're coughing up around 110 yards per game, which is 8th worst in the league. They're still not the healthiest front. They get a guy who's made this role his own. Mason, he opened the season up with over 80 yards in 4 of his first 5 games and failed to hit that mark in the last 2 weeks. He got hurt in that time. The 49ers have been hurt as across the board, pretty much. That's how they are. I think Mason has a bounce back week. Prior to form with the matchup, it's a positive matchup in his hands. And, if we can get over 15 rush attempts, it seems to be the marker for Mason. 14 if you want to be a bit more specific. But, we get the 15 rush attempts, we should be good. Dallas gives up around 23, 24 rush attempts per game. When he hits to 14, 15, his numbers generally shoot up over that 85, 90 marker, as it were. So Jordan Mason, if we can get to 14 and a half rush attempts and 80 and a half rushing yards, I feel pretty confident about that. If he is healthy heading into week 8 slate against the Cowboys, we're going to wrap that up. One more total. 10 minutes. Wow, for a 5-minute show, that's incredible. I've outdone myself. We're going to wrap this up for Going42 Live. I am your host, Dan, at the B-League says for B-League Speaking Show. And on behalf of Underdog Fantasy, promo code GF2 for 100% match deposit up with 250 big ones on your initial outlay. We're going to wrap up with our Sunday slate props. As always, thanks for tuning in. Pick number 1, AJ Brown, higher than 77.5. Receiving yards in Cincinnati, or at Cincinnati, if you want to say it like that. He's not really in him. He's at him. That's a little weird. Let's kick on. Pick number 2, Bo Nix, lower than 190.5 passing yards versus Carolina at home in Denver. Pick number 3, we're going to go double whammy. It's an either or, however you want to feel about it, because we're feeling a little spicy. We're feeling a little weird. Pick number 3 is going to be either Nick Ikini Westbrook and or Chig Okonkwo, higher than half a touchdown. You get that 3.52 or 3.72 boost. Find the play, which one it was. It was changing at Denver, going for over half a touchdown. Pick number 4, Trevor Lawrence, lower than 233.5 passing yards versus Green Bay, because why would he? I don't know. And pick number 5, Jordan Mason, higher than 80.5 rushing yards versus Dallas. I like those props for this week. Thank you for tuning in. As always, Dan at the B-League says, come find me in our Discord. Stay tuned for your Sunday programming tomorrow, which starts with Kyle, Jamie, and Topher. As always, they kick off around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Thanks for tuning in. Safe bets. Happy